Well, how do you increase and decrease the risk on stock mutual funds? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, yesterday we covered a very important topic and it ended up being just part one. Have a lot more to cover. We'll be doing that today. Hopefully we'll get that done today. If not, we'll probably push into Thursday because tomorrow John Apollo will be on the program with me to be talking college funding and admissions and everything that's going on in that world. We'll be talking to John Apollo. We talk to him once a month, and he'll be in tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get quite a bit of this done today. But I think it's a very, very important subject, and it basically comes down to how you got to take some risk in your retirement portfolio. And in order to do so, does that mean that, which is the popular notion, you take more stock risk, you add more risk to it? Well, as I dig deeper, I find that most generally accepted principles, advice, whatever you want to call it, comes down to the absolute truth. And it's been a while since we've talked about this, but with absolute truths, it comes down to if you do 1 plus 2 plus 3, you're always going to get 6. If you do 2 plus 2, you're always going to get 4. So if you take step A, step B, and step C, you will always get step D, just as an example. And so what I find is that they take a lot of this advice, the financial media, whomever, takes a lot of this advice and makes it into a cookie cutter, just step 1, step 2, step 3, when here's the reality about money. It just doesn't work that easy or that predictable. There's so many moving parts, and there's situations where sometimes 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. Sometimes 2 plus 2 equals 3. Sometimes 2 plus 2 equals 10. It's different with every individual person, and that's what's so very important to know and understand. Because when you start reading things on social media, it comes across as, or financial social media, let me say that, it comes across as it's, if you do these important things, you'll always get this. Well, it just doesn't work like that. And my concern is that people take that at face value and say, well, I'm saving enough. I'm saving at least 15% of my income, and I'm making at least this kind of return. Then according to what I read in Money Magazine, all that says that I'll have this amount of money to retire on, and I'll be in good shape. Or this model on XYZ financial page on the internet, this calculator told me that if I did this, this, and this, I'd always get this. It doesn't quite work that way. And I was having this conversation just not too long ago with this individual who was talking about retiring and was talking about the assets that they had accumulated. And in our discussions, I was saying, the one thing that you've got to be careful about, and it's the one thing that worries me the most about most people who are investing money today for retirement, is that they get into this spot that the market always goes up, and this belief that the market always goes up. And when the market doesn't always go up, if I showed you a 60, 80-year period of time from top to bottom, you're going to say, oh, you're wrong, because look, the market always goes up. But in between, along that stretch of 60 to 80 years, there are times when the market goes way down, and it has a negative effect on time. Value is not the only thing that you lose when you go through a bear market. I'm saying this only to show you there's a whole nother side of this. And I think it's from a stewardship standpoint, it's important to look at one side versus the other side and really study it and pray about it and figure out where you are when it comes to these various principles and these various beliefs. And you can go through, I'll give you a perfect example. The financial crisis. The market started to fall in 2007, and it fell and declined almost 55% by the time it hit the bottom in early 2000, in March of 2009. And that trip wiped out all of the gain dating back to, I believe it was 1998. In other words, you were on the same level if you were invested in stock-based mutual funds. You were on the same level that you were back in most cases, if you look at especially some of the index funds, as you were in 1998. To get back to where you were in 2007 took anywhere from 5 to 6, maybe 7 years, depending on how you invested on the way back on the recovery mode. So that is that's a really tough hit to take when you're right at retirement. And the thing about these cycles, and very important that you understand how these cycles work, is that there's nothing in the past or in the future that says these cycles will go away. They're there for a reason. They're there and they play an important function. And I wish I had time just to get into that today, but I don't. We'll get back to it, though, I promise. And they play an important role. And so if you are an investor and you didn't go through the real tough times in 1999 to 2002 or 2007 to 2009, the chances and probabilities are very high that you will meet that type of a market sometime in the future. And that's the thing. Yeah, I believe cycles are alive and well, and they happen. We go through good markets, we go through bad markets, we circle back to good markets, and it goes in a big cycle. I do believe that's true. What I can't sit and tell you, I can't sit here and say, but on the other hand, that might be the case, but we're probably way off for that, 10 years down the road before that'll happen again. Or it could happen, or if you listen to some people, it's going to happen tomorrow. My point to you is that you don't want to you want to get out of the predicting game and trying to figure out when it's going to hit, and be in the preparation game. Be prepared for when things change. Be prepared to make the changes that you feel like are important for your portfolio to weather an upcoming storm. It's important to prepare, not to predict. Very important to remember. This one advisor says to me, and he's talking about the case for increasing the amount that you have in stocks, equities, which if someone says equities and stocks, they're really the same thing, and stock-based mutual funds. He says, to me, equities aren't about taking more risk. So he's saying that if you add equities into a retirement portfolio, you're really not taking more risk. I would disagree with that, but that's what he says. It's about giving your portfolio a fighting chance to keep up with your life. And if you look at it from my standpoint and say, although that can be true, there's also evidence that if you bring and increase your stock market exposure in your retirement portfolio, that you get to a point to where that risk greatly outweighs the risk of being able to keep up with your life. And he says, you're probably going to have 30 years in retirement. And I always talked about how most of these pop culture finance articles, they talk about you have to achieve $1 million before you can retire. Where they pull $1 million out of the hat, I have no idea. But it's $1 million, or now it's the popular number is 1.7 million. Where they get that, once again, they don't really tell you. And I want to say this, that if you look at all of this from an individual standpoint and say, yeah, all this could be true, some of this could be false, some of this could apply, some of this could not apply, and you figure out the plan that fits your values, that fits your goals, that fits your level of risk you want to take, I don't want to say I promise, but I think that there's a great possibility that when you're done, that portfolio, your portfolio that's distinctly put together for you, it's going to look a lot different than the things I'm reading to you about and telling you about. This is Bob Brooks, saying you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you got a question for me, please go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and I will get you taken care of. That's off the website, prudentmoney.com. I meant to say this before I got off on a tangent. The back half of this quote, he says, you're probably going to have 30 years in retirement. That would mean, and the statistics don't support that people are in this great a shape today heading into retirement, but it would mean that you are able to retire early, 60, let's say, and 30 years you're going to be in retirement would take you to age 90. I don't know. I just really wonder where some of this advice comes from. But it says generally, advisors recommend clients in their late 60s and early 70s to allocate about 40 to 60% to equities, depending on other retirement resources, lifestyle needs, and risk portfolio. Now, that is actually I think a very true statement from the standpoint of it also depends. This first part of this article that I found that actually says something like this, but it depends upon your other retirement resources. It depends upon your lifestyle. It depends on your needs and risk profile. What I want to point out is that piece of advice right there started off general. Everybody who's in this age bracket should be 40 to 60% in stocks, but it depends on your retirement resources. It depends on your lifestyle. It depends on what makes you unique. It also needs to influence what you do with money. This is Bob Brooks. We are up against a break. Stick around and I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Once you get to the website, go up to the top. There is a link. Just click through and send in your questions. We'll get you taken care of. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Let's talk a little bit about some more of this generally accepted ideas and advice, and then we'll get into some just a few things to consider. It's quite a long list of just a few things to consider, but we'll talk about that next. Diversification, one advisor says, also remains important in a retiree's portfolio. Let me say this. Diversification is the heart and soul of a portfolio. Very, very important. The problem is that people walk around with different ideas of what diversification actually means. This particular in this particular quote, it says, within equities, retirees should have international holdings and stocks with different market capitalizations. Some holdings should be growth focused and some should be focus on income through dividends. That's always been interesting to me because the impact of international versus domestic doesn't really, it brings a little bit of diversification to the mix because they're investing in two different countries, but at least two different countries. But the problem that you run into is that they also bring the same element of risk. There's no diversification. You're just by bringing in international stock funds, you're increasing the level of overall stock risk. You're not decreasing it. I mean, not to say that can't happen. I don't want to say that. I mean, it's a possibility it could happen, but highly unlikely. And highly unlikely you're going to get benefits from different sizes of companies that you invest in. So the way that I look at diversification is simply this. It's not about the number, it's about the type. I had a client come in one time, show me his portfolio and said, hey, you see, I have 10 different funds that I have money spread out amongst these 10 different funds. I have great diversification. And I said, the problem with the diversification that you're practicing is that it's really not about the number, because you have 10 funds that are all stock funds and they all go the same way in a downturn. So you have no real balance and working in this strategy as far as being invested in 10 different funds. Now, if you said, I have four funds that I've invested into. One is a bond fund, one is a gold fund, one is a stock fund, and one is a fixed guaranteed type, stable value type fund. Now, there is different types of potential diversification, and in a downturn, they might, but the chances are there are better probabilities that they won't all move in the same direction. And that's what you're looking for at diversification. You're looking for investments that don't all move in the same direction. Once again, 10 stock funds are probably going to move all in the same direction, which is down. And diversification is there to decrease the risk, not increase the risk. So I hope that makes sense. Then finally, stock market exposure should not be fixed in retirement. And that's something that I'm a big believer in, that to be an effective investor, you don't want any of your holdings always the same as when you started out. Let's say for today, as a good example, it might be that today it's appropriate for your stock exposure to be 30% of your overall portfolio. You're going into retirement, you don't want to take as much risk, so you lower it. That may not be the case 2 years from now. It might be that we've gone through a big bear market cycle like I've been talking about, and we get to the other side, and it's a great time, believe it or not, a great time to increase your stock exposure when everything is on sale because it's lost so much money. So yeah, stock market exposure should not be fixed in retirement. Now let's talk a little bit about some things to consider. Active management strategies versus buy and hold. An active management strategy means there's somebody, typically your advisor that you work with, and they are going to physically manage the money on your behalf. They're going to be moving things around. They're going to change strategies. They're going to do, and that should bring an advantage to your portfolio. What it should do is cut back on risk. But that's an active management strategy versus buy and hold is starting out with a strategy and never changing it. So sticking to your guns from the beginning all the way to the end of retirement. The problem that you run into is what we said a little while ago, is that you run into situations where what you're doing needs to be changed because the market has changed. So I have my bias because that's what I do. An active management strategy, I think, is very important to keep things in line with the risk and opportunities that are in the market at the time. The next one is don't let your belief system be that the market always goes up, and that in itself is a risk strategy, that you can just count on that the market's always going to go up and you're never going to have a problem. Sure, you're going to lose money. Sure, you're going to go through bear markets, but you're always going to go back up and you'll be able to survive it. It's a dangerous strategy. I would rearrange that and say make the assumption that yes, bear markets have not gone away, and bear markets can happen, and bear markets can be hazardous to your overall financial portfolio. Having said that, you don't want to invest with fear. You don't want to invest from the standpoint of you're always looking over your right shoulder, wondering when the next bear market's going to hit. This is why flexibility is so important. You just want to watch and stay flexible, and this is what active management can do for you, and stay on top of what changes are occurring in the market, and are we seeing, looking out into the distance and seeing storm clouds, or is it sunny and bright? So you just want to keep an eye on that. Another thing to keep in mind is that this fascination with target date funds, and I was reading an article not too long ago about the target date funds that many of you see in your 401k plans. I mean, it's a very big concept, and a lot of people use this as their way of investing for the future. And I'm always amazed how confident that professionals are in this concept to making it work. It's always kind of amazed me. A target date fund is let's just say it's a mutual fund that corresponds with the date that you're going to retire. So let's say that you're going to retire in 2045, and you're going to put all your money into the 2045 fund, and between today and everybody who's invested in that fund between today and 2045, that fund is supposed to reduce risk year after year by a small margin, but it's supposed to reduce risk, and take you to the point to where you're ready for retirement. The problem that I've seen with these is that they tend to take way more risk than you think that they are. So I'm not a real big believer. I believe that you can take the same concept and develop your own target date and do the same thing, but just be careful of that as this is an absolute truth, as we talked about. It's important to have a cash account to fill in the gaps. And what I mean by this is, especially if you're in a market that's not returning growth, that's not paying income, and you're losing money, you certainly don't want to be tapping into that money to take out retirement withdrawals. And this is where a big cash account can come in handy, where you can switch your monthly withdrawals that you need for retirement from your investment portfolio, so you can just leave it alone and let it get back its growth is lost, hopefully, and just start taking from your cash. And then at some point you can switch back to your portfolio of investments, and then you can start taking measures to implement that. You can start adding back to your cash and increasing that a part of your portfolio strategy back up again. Cash or money markets, whatever holds cash, is a very important part, or can be a very important part, in a retirement portfolio retirement strategy. It just depends on what else you're doing. It depends on if you have pensions coming in. It depends on a lot of things. Once again, none of this is cookie cutter. You gotta take it and make it a part of what you're doing and what you have for retirement to make it all worthwhile. Last one is no experience in bear or bad markets. And we've talked quite a bit today about bear markets, and that's a bad market, a market where investors typically lose a lot of money. The problem that I see today is really twofold. Number one, there's a lot of the investment community of investors, regardless of age, that have not experienced a true back-bending bear market, as we saw in 2007 and 2009, and 1999 to 2002. And so keep that in mind. Then keep the other aspect of this in mind is that, and this is the bigger problem, is that there has not been a lot of professionals who are managing money have never managed money in a market like that, nor the advisor probably has not been an advisor in that type of, and had clients to help in that kind of a market environment. So just keep that in mind as well. Well, we covered quite a bit yesterday and today on this, and hope that it's opened up your eyes to maybe looking at some of this in a different light. But if you got any questions about this, about anything you're doing with your own portfolio that you want to ask me, just go to prudentmoney.com, go to the Ask Bob section and send it in. I will get you taken care of. And you can always catch these on podcasts wherever you like to listen to your podcast, and listen to them over again or for the first time. And that's all. And you can also listen to it at prudentmoney.com. This is Bob Brooks, and we are all out of time. Until we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.